Welcome to Mainland, your local regional television station, coming to you from the Nelson and Tasman region. In today's news, Erie launch examined, guilty plea and vicious attack, new revelations about Trafalgar Centre, and anti-bullying campaign takes off. The 9-metre launch Erie is now at Port Taranaki. The launch was towed in excess of 200 kilometres to port by the Navy vessel HMNZS Wellington and arrived at New Plymouth late on Tuesday afternoon. The Erie will be taken out of the water on Wednesday and will undergo an examination to try and uncover any clues as to what has happened to William Carey Blair. The family of Mr Blair have told media they don't believe he's taken his own life and that theories around his disappearance remained speculation. A fishing deckhand has this week in court pleaded guilty to slashing a man's throat on board a vessel in Nelson in early February. In the Nelson District Court on Tuesday, 30-year-old Joseph Kwaru Tapahe Lewis admitted to wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, along with other charges relating to assaulting a female. The court was told how on February the 7th at around 3 a.m, Lewis had entered the wheelhouse where the victim had been talking to his wife in Indonesia on a cell phone when Lewis suddenly slashed the man's neck with a fishing knife. Lewis had attempted to strike up a conversation just prior to the attack, but the victim turned away to continue talking with his wife on the phone. After Lewis slashed the man's throat, he went on to stab the victim in the chest and abdomen. The victim was hospitalised for 8 days. Lewis was remanded in custody and a psychiatric assessment was ordered prior to sentencing on April 29th. With the recent resolve by Council to keep the Trafalgar Centre closed comes new revelations from a local resident. Mainland Director Gary Watson spoke with resident Kerry Neal about his findings and observations.
Let's talk about the Trafalgar Centre.
Okay, right.
There is talk of it being an earthquake risk. There is debate about how deep the foundations go down. You have done your research and uncovered some very interesting things that you've been sharing with us.
Sure.
And we thought it was a great time to bring this all out in the open.
Well, I think it's extremely important that people get an understanding of the basics of the issue.
Is it that people are reading some of the plans wrong in terms of when you are drawing the length of a foundation on a page, it is normal policy to put a little squiggly line and then another squiggly line to show that there's a lot more in this length.
Okay.
Isn't that a technical?
Well, that's how a draftsman would do it. There is nothing in any report presented to Council that states that the centre must be closed. All right? You got that clear?
So why that decision?
They brought in a lawyer to give an opinion on their liability. Now, you can debate that as to whether that was wise or not, but that's what happened. But he gave an opinion.
Maybe we should bring one in now to check on the show then.
Exactly right. And if you asked him, have we got a liability, what's he going to say? He's not going to say she's right, Gary.
No, of course not.
No, so
how are you going to get extra business out of that?
Oh, well, I mean, in fairness to him or her, whoever it was, you can't expect them to say, oh, yes, I'm sure she's right. They're going to say, for this reason and that reason, you have a liability.
But they'd also be accepting some responsibility if they did say that.
This is where it's getting interesting. So the sad reality is that this decision was made on a draft interim report, not a final report.
Okay.
So the lesson here is keep lawyers out of issues until practical people have had a chance to look at it. Otherwise you end up in this sort of schmozzle that they're in. Okay?
So is the issue of how far the foundations go down?
Yes, it is. Originally, I'll be brief, the specification required 10 to 12 metre precast piles driven on that site. And the depth was determined from a lot of analysis of the site, core sampling and probing and whatnot, and a little bit of winging it too comes into it, especially back then, a little bit. They're still doing that today, winging it a little bit, because you can't tell exactly until you start driving these things where the absolute base is that you are wanting. So you drive a pile normally, and when it reaches a resistance level, in this case in the Trafalgar Centre, 49 tonnes resistance on every pile. That system was the original intention. It got superseded with a superior system known as bulbed piles. Very briefly, what it is, a system where they drill the ground, insert a steel liner, pour in a mix of dry concrete into the bottom and hammer it with a rammer, with a what used to be steam driven now.
So it spreads out, makes a foot.
Big elephant's foot.
Okay.
People are familiar with the old steam ones that we always used to see, but these days they're far more sophisticated.
Okay.
So it spreads out the base and gives you this massive big base to sit on good ground as well, because that's what you're that's what you're looking for, and you won't an engineer won't accept anything else than competent
So they're
material.
down about 12 to 15 metres, are they?
You're going to find out exactly in the next day. They're right down there now drilling at an angle to determine the depth.
But you've got some photos that show these pipes being prepared to go into the ground, which suggests that they are down fairly deep.
Right. Now, can I just clarify the point here to clear the confusion? This substituted system, unfortunately, the records of it are not showing up in City Hall's records or anybody else's, because the engineer that did the job departed, and for some years the firm has not been operating. So, not consequently, unfortunately, the records for some reason of that superior system did not get into council's records. All right. So there's, dare I say, there's been a bit of guesswork going on. The people that wrote the report would challenge me on that, but I'll use that word in the meantime. Let's perhaps substitute that with confusion. This confusion has occurred because that record is not available.
But in all fairness, the council right now, if they are measuring to see how far it goes down,
They are.
number one, that says there is some doubt, and number two, it says we need to confirm it.
That's right. So here we are with the original authors of the report, very uncomfortable on the basis that we've arrived at this very almost silly situation, when all they did was present an interim report for as it says, for people to give an opinion on.
But in all fairness to the council, and I don't always see eye to eye to the council,
Right.
but aren't they better to play on the side of caution by keeping it closed until all these things have been verified? And then they can say, right, here's the report, here's to show that it's safe, we're okay with it.
In view of the run of play, they have no option. You're quite right. But I can only repeat that had they have recognised everybody, I'm talking about executive staff and all in City Hall, recognised that that was an interim report presented for people to put input into, and that's a normal process, as I'm sure you would know.
Yeah, but when somebody says, look, we think something could happen, right, don't you take that cautious approach and say, well, look, until that is all verified that that is safe, we are actually better just to take a cautious approach.
You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
But there is I repeat, there is nothing in the report that said the building had to shut. They said it looks like there might be a need to consider upgrading it. And that's really what happened. But of course, this, I can only repeat, they asked a legal opinion.
But my understanding is a lot more other buildings around the city which are far more risk, like the School of Music and various other buildings around that are in a bigger crowd. What about the cathedral? There is a lot of talk about that being a problem.
I'm not going to comment on that because I haven't studied it. But in general terms, you've got to be right. Anything that's just masonry and mortar, bricks and mortar,
Unreinforced,
has got to be looked at seriously. In some cases, they've stood up in Christchurch remarkably well. But if you're getting into the finer details of engineering, you would have to seriously look at that sort of method of building, because they're only relying on gravity to hold them together, not lateral movement.
It all boils down to the little story of the man who built his house on the rock and the man who built his house on the sand.
Well, of course, most of the world is built on the sand. And anyway, as far as the structure goes of Trafalgar Centre, you're familiar now with the plan of it. If I could just briefly outline again the extent of the engineering that went into that. On the western side, the Saltwater Creek side, all that zone when you're inside the building and you're looking at the seating and the concrete work all around there, that's built sort of a semi-pyramid, a pyramid principle, all right, on that side. There are 2 rows of piles way down deep, 4 metres apart. On the eastern side, because the walls are a lot higher, there are 3 rows of piles, 12 metres apart, with this enormous triangle, we'll call it, of concrete work locking it all together. Now, there was concern that the ground was going to liquefy and laterally spread and consequently strain the building, and the arches will collapse. Now,
Isn't there big wire ropes under the foundation?
You're absolutely right. Again, in the report, nowhere in the report is there any reference to the fact that that building is tied together underneath. Now, you bring a very important point into this. The 30 million price tag they've put on restoring the building applies to bringing it up to virtually new building standards, all right? And virtually ensuring that under the most extreme situation, the building will never even crack, all right? Do we want that, or do we just want something that's not going to collapse and hurt you?
Another question for you.
Yeah.
Why is it that the engineers who designed the upgrade and allowed all that money to be spent on it did not do their homework enough to say that this is a potential problem? Because at that point of time, before you put that investment in, surely you have to make sure that everything, all your ducks in a row.
You may say that. I'm not going to comment on that.
I'm asking the question. Anyway, look, Kerry, thank you very much for all that. It's great to have this all explained, and I think it's really going to give the council going to have to do a lot more thinking and talk to people like yourself and other folks that have got all that information.
Yeah. Watch this space.
A bullying prevention project known as Equaliser uses a series of youth music workshops to teach young people how to write and record music using computer-based software. Project coordinator Paul Johnston says music is an effective way to bring important messages and sensitive topics to the forefront. Chrissy Small caught up with Paul to find out about the project in Motueka.
Paul Johnson, there's some exciting incentives for anti-bullying that you're heading at the moment. Can you tell me a bit about it? It's called Equaliser.
Yep.
What does that mean, and what is it, and when is it?
Okay, cool. Lots of questions, but it's initiated by the government. There's a fund out by Family and Community Services called the Te Punanga Humaru Fund. So nationwide, we're trying to raise awareness around the issues of bullying, which obviously are pretty key at the moment with young people. So here in the top of the south, I work for SVS Living Safe Motueka, and in collaboration with the Relationships Aotearoa, we're working on this project, making music with young people, exploring those themes and allowing young people to voice their opinions, views and speak out about these issues, and hopefully get some healing and some solutions and some strength-based stuff around that.
That sounds really exciting. Now, So this is youth of all ages?
Yeah, we're saying sort of 12 to 24. the bigger, wider youth, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, and of course music. Is it rapping, just rapping music, or is it all kinds of music?
All kinds of music. We've got heavy metal bands, we've got country music singers, we've got some rapping. There's no barriers to genre or style. All young people that I talk to are into music, so we want them to just create whatever they want to create, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, is there some kind of big concert at the end of it all, and where they showcase what they've been doing?
Yep.
Great.
Absolutely. So, we're going to be making music over the next 3 weeks in workshops, and then there's also the opportunity for youth bands to come record at NMIT later in April, and we're going to launch the CD in Youth Week in May. So the 24th of May we'll have a gig in Nelson. Young people come along and play their tunes and tell us a bit about their music. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, how do they get involved?
Contact me at youth@svs.org.nz, an email. And if you're young and you're out there and you want to be a part of it, there's the opportunity. We're running workshops from next week for 3 weeks, and there's some open sessions that any young people can attend.
Right.
So that'd be the way, youth@svs.org.nz.
With Nelson having the fastest growing population of any region in the South Island and the second fastest in New Zealand between 2006 and 2013, then the question of traffic management will arguably have to be addressed, and soon. Traffic along Rocks Road and Waimea Road each weekday morning is bringing more and more challenges to commuters who are trying to get to work on time, and add to that a lack of public transport services from the Tasman area into Richmond and Nelson. The added cause of congestion could be put down to a lack of basic transport services. Nelson City Councillor Brian McGurk accused Tasman Council this week of freeloading on the public transport from Richmond to Nelson bus service, costing $535,000 to run over the 2013-2014 year, with TDC contributing only $10,000 to the late bus service running between Nelson and Richmond on a Saturday night. Mainland approached TDC this week about the issue, but Mayor Kempthorne was not available for comment. We'll bring you more on this public transport issue tomorrow. New Zealand First has come out this week and said liquor retailers must have processes in place to prevent online deliveries of alcohol to underage buyers. Spokesperson for Family Affairs Barbara Stewart was commenting on a television program that showed large quantities of alcohol being delivered to 16-year-olds. In 3 out of 5 deliveries, the courier failed to ask for identification to check the buyers were over the minimum legal purchasing age of 18. Mrs. Stewart says the retailers must take responsibility. They must provide their procedures and abide by the law. She says one simple measure might be for retailers to insist that the courier companies who make the deliveries either abide by the law or lose the contract. If this requires close monitoring, so be it, she says. After the break, we'll bring you the latest weather update and some events and happenings coming up from around the region.